My name is Lawrence Souffrant. I am a professional speaker, entrepreneur, father, husband. I wear a lot of hats. But on today, I want to discuss my passion for helping men rise to their highest self. And one of the ways that I've helped men rise to their highest self is by creating a course called Restoring Masculinity. The idea of this course is 8 modules. It's available online, www.lsmasculinity.com. It's available online. It's a 8-module course to teach you what masculinity is, what femininity is, how to channel your masculinity, how to harness your femininity. It talks about how to challenge the ego, which is a big deal with men. We have to learn how to deal with that ego. It also deals with practical things like the foods you should eat, workouts, etc. And so it's very comprehensive. My last module is probably my most complex module, where I deal with energy transmutation. And what that means is where you take one form of energy, you reduce it back to its raw form as energy, and then convert it to a different form of energy. So an example of that is our sexual energy. I teach how we can take our sexual energy, convert it into just raw form of energy, and then turn it into a more productive energy. That's how you're able to launch your business. That's how you're able to get work done. That's how you're able to just have some order in your life, because you already have the energy within you. It's about converting it into something more productive. So it's 8 modules. Each of them are about an hour, and it comes with a workbook, a Restore Masculinity workbook, so that you can keep notes and retain the information better. So I strongly suggest, if you're a man that's trying to be a better father, a better businessman, a better teacher, a better whatever, if you are a man that's looking to rise to their highest potential, I strongly encourage that you enroll in the course. One of my struggles when it comes to teaching about masculinity and femininity is that it doesn't fit the Western context. The Western world has separated masculinity and femininity to gender roles. So the Western world says the man is masculine, the female is feminine. But in the Eastern world, or the rest of the world, Africa, etc., masculinity and femininity exist within one being. We're all masculine and feminine. And based off of the role we have to accomplish at the time, that determines which energy we invoke. So if I'm about to be a hunter, if I'm about to go out there and hunt, I have to invoke my masculinity. But when I'm home with my family, I invoke my femininity, unless I'm setting things in order, right? And so as a human being, as a single human being, you have to be able to channel both masculine and feminine energy. When you get into a relationship, now it's about that dynamic between the roles of masculinity and femininity. Things shift a little bit, but you always go back and forth. And in the genius moment, you're actually combining both together. So art is an example of the combination of masculine and feminine, where there's order, structure, technique in art, but there's also that expressive, creative element in art. So when you master both energy, you are a better artist in all aspects of the word. And so teaching these concepts is difficult because it's not in line with Western context. What I encourage people to do is to kind of get away from your Western understanding of things and listen to what I'm saying, and then study it from an Eastern perspective, and you'll get a better understanding as to what I mean. One of the struggles with men, particularly in America, is there is rarely any safe space for us to be emotional. And what I mean by that is we're going to feel our emotions regardless. We don't need permission to feel what we feel. But what we do need is safe spaces to express what we're feeling without our manhood being questioned and without our relationships being in danger. So in the Western world, we have to be intentional in finding those spaces where we can be expressive, because the truth is, as much as we want our partner to be able to handle us in our raw emotional state, 9 out of 10 times they cannot handle us as men in that raw emotional state. That doesn't mean that we're doomed or we're lost. That means we have to be that much more intentional in finding those safe spaces to be emotional. So when it comes to society's expectations of masculinity, I'm actually trying to move away from society's expectation, because they have perverted masculinity to such a degree that men think their role is to be solely masculine. And so what ends up happening is, instead of them actually being masculine, they present as masculine, which is two different things. Men feel like they're boxed in, where if I show any vulnerability, if I show any emotions, then I'm less masculine. To a degree, yes, because emotions is a feminine trait. but human beings have both masculine and feminine energy. And so it doesn't make you less manly to have emotions, but you are operating in a feminine state. And so what I'm saying is society tends to make manhood and masculinity one and the same. One of the things that I teach in my course, Restoring Masculinity, is that masculinity is an energy, manhood is a philosophy. And so the energy of masculinity has to be understood, as well as the energy of femininity has to be understood so that your philosophy of manhood can be comprehensive and balanced. And so society is not going to guide us in that direction because honestly, society does not care about the mental health of men. So it's up to us to learn these things so that we can take charge and control over what it means to be a man in this context. When it comes to men expressing emotions, men do experience emotions different from women, and it's both nature and nurture. So when you study the male brain, there are certain hormones that are released in the male brains in the certain stages of their life. So as children, there's a certain set of hormones. When they get into the teenage years, there's a new set of hormones. And then there's even something called the daddy brain, where when they become fathers, there's a different set of hormones being released. And so when we're dealing with energy, hormones is the physical manifestation of energy. Hormones carry the energy, in other words. Emotions is just another form of energy. And so men experience their emotions very different from women. Now, society tries to teach us, or really, I would say try to control us in how we express our emotions. Because when a man gets too emotional, and I put that in quotes because no such thing exists for a woman for real, at least on a social standpoint, right? But when men become too emotional, society feels like they're in danger. In other words, a man's emotions is translated as dangerous in society. The difference between how a man experiences emotions and how a woman experiences emotions is really based off of how the brain is operating. So it really depends on the stage in life that the man is in. So older men, for example, based off of where they are in life, how the hormones are being released, they tend to experience emotions very similar to how females or women experience emotions when they're at a younger age. Right? So it's all about the stage in life. My goal is that no matter what stage you're in, you learn how to navigate those emotions without losing your social status or your relationships. Let's talk about men in leadership positions. Let's start there. When you are a leader, it is your responsibility to navigate and control the situation and the team. A effective leader knows how to, I'm going to use the word manipulate, though it has a negative connotation, but an effective leader knows how to manipulate the situation and the team for the sake of a common goal. So if we're dealing with a husband and wife scenario, if the husband is taking the leadership position, he has to know how to navigate his wife's emotional situation. He can't do that if he hasn't mastered how to navigate his own emotional situation. And why is that? Because feminine energy is feminine energy. So every man has the opportunity to practice navigating feminine energy within himself. And when he learns how to first accept it, allow it within him, and understand that what I'm experiencing emotionally is a response to whatever's happening internally with me, then he can then extend that space to his wife, to his children, to his friends, to his team, right? But if he hasn't done the work to express or to accept these emotions that's happening within him, he will never understand what they're going through. So for him, it's always gonna be confusing. It's not gonna make sense. Well, of course it's not gonna make sense because emotions is not logical. And logic is not the remedy to emotions. A lot of men feel like if they know the facts, if they know the truth, then somehow their emotions will change. The truth is, no, it won't, because you didn't respond to facts or truth. You responded to internal processes when you heard whatever you heard. Even if it was a lie, your insides moved to the information. So it's not the logic or the information that determines emotions. It's your internal makeup, whether that be how your hormones are balanced, whether that be how you grew up. A lot of us, we have traumas that we don't know are traumas because they only are triggered in specific nuanced situations. And because that's not an everyday thing, we think we're fine. And we're battling deep childhood wounds. right? And so as a leader, whenever you find yourself responding a certain way, instead of attacking whatever triggered that emotions, ask yourself, well, why did that cause me to respond that way? Learn how to navigate your own emotions. So that way, when your team begins to get emotional, and this is really I'm summarizing emotional intelligence, right? When your team gets emotional, you learn how to be empathetic. You learn how to connect with them because they can't hear you if they don't feel connected to you. Right? And so it's not a performative connection, but it's a real connection because you've been there. Maybe not that exact situation, but you know the emotions that they're experiencing. You've been there, so you can connect with them and then redirect them to a healthier or more productive state. A husband can only do that if he's done the work within himself. Emotional intelligence, or what we call EQ, can be broken down into four major parts. Some will have five or six, you know how people are, but four major parts, and that's self-awareness, self-regulation, then social awareness and social regulation. Those are the four parts of emotional intelligence. The idea is that you have to be aware of what your emotions are. So that's step one, and that is truly the hardest step. Because emotions are not logical, we have to now do the work of articulating what doesn't have words. Right? And so that requires now a connection of both the right side and the left side of the brain. This is that genius space that I'm always talking about. Emotional intelligence is about putting words to what you're feeling and then just accepting it instead of trying to defend it, justify it, or even neglect it. Accept it. This is what I'm feeling. I'm hurt, or I'm frustrated, or I'm disappointed, right? Or I'm happy. I'm overwhelmed. Whatever those words are, in emotional intelligence, we discover what those words are based off how we're feeling, and then we learn how to regulate. Regulate, not suppress. Because if you suppress an emotion, what actually happens is it starts to take form in your body. Studies have already proven that a lot of the stress, the Alzheimer's, a lot of these autoimmune diseases, so-called diseases, are really consequences of suppressed emotions. The lack of forgiveness or the not willingness to deal with disappointments. When you suppress them, they start to manifest in your body. This is already scientifically proven. And so in order to stay healthy, you want to be able to regulate, which means manage, which means I feel this, and when I feel this, I'm going to go through this process to work through the feelings. So that's the first half of emotional intelligence. When you master it within yourself, then you can get into the social awareness because, once again, you're aware of your emotions, so your lens is more clear to be aware of someone else's emotions. And then social regulation. Now, how can I help this person move from this emotion to a more safe or productive space so that the work can continue? Because therapy is a long-term process. Right? If we're in a workforce and you're a leader, you don't have time to conduct therapy with your team. But what you can do is help them regulate through those emotions so that they can be productive at work, and then they go to therapy at their own time. And so this is the power of emotional intelligence. It helps you first be a better self and then be a better leader. If I'm honest with you, I can't think of a moment where expressing my emotions made me feel stronger. It made me feel more vulnerable. And what I've learned is it's safe and okay to be vulnerable. And so an example that I could think of is certain conversations that I had with my wife. I remember the first time that I had to share with my wife that I had a porn addiction. It was controversial for me because I grew up in a very conservative church background. And I didn't know how to articulate to my wife that at times when she'd go to sleep, I'll go watch porn. And it would be like a daily thing for me. And so I was struggling. There'll be moments where it was like I'll be frustrated, and it's because I didn't get my fix of porn for the day. And I didn't know how to communicate that. When I finally communicated it to her, I was nervous. I felt vulnerable. It didn't feel empowering at all. It was her response that made me feel safe. The way that she was able to hear me and not reduce me to that one problem. In fact, I believe that was the first step in helping me get over my porn addiction. The next step was learning sexual transmutation, the energy transmutation thing I talked about. And so I think as men, we have to accept the reality that there'll be moments in our lives where we will not be strong, but that doesn't make us less manly. We're just going through whatever we're going through. It's okay to be vulnerable if you're in a space that is safe to be vulnerable. You don't want to be vulnerable when the lion is chasing you. You want to be strong. You want to be ready to fight. When you get back to the village, you should be able to express all of those emotions that you were encountering. In fact, let me give you this. What they used to do in some African tribes is when the men would go out to war, when they went out to hunt, whatever it was, there's a lot of things going on out there that the women have no idea because they're not in that space. When they would come back to the village, whether it be the elders, the women, and the children, they would then create a celebration, a feast, if you will, and they would dance and they would celebrate. And the idea behind that was to help the soldiers or the warriors or the hunters. The design was to help them feel like they were safe again. Because when you're out there in the wilderness where there's wild beasts all around you, if you're out there at war where there's the chance of the enemy killing you, you need a process to recognize the difference between that environment and the safe environment. And so one of the things that men can do is to get in touch with themselves and relay to their wife the things that they would help them feel safe when they get back home. Like, babe, I've been out there, I've been hustling, making this money. It's been stressful. When I get home, this will help me switch from that work person to this home person where I know it's okay for me to be safe. And women 100% can help with that. If you're a single man, come up with a process that you can do with your friends. Whatever it is, it could be something as simple as when you get off work, you go to the gym or you go play basketball, you go, play pool. It doesn't matter, but it is a consistent process, a ceremony, a ritual, if you will, that helps you remind yourself that you're safe here. And so I think that's greatly important because emotions not necessarily meant to make you feel strong. There's no space where I can say emotions will make you feel strong, but it can help you feel safe. Energy transmutation is pretty much converting one form of energy into another form of energy. Now, here's the thing. We actually do it all the time. We do it in terms of like a social structure. Like the electricity that we're working is not raw electricity. It's being converted, it's being manipulated so many ways. When they would use steam energy, right? They're taking the steam and they're using it to power up another source. We're consistently transmuting energy. So when it comes to our cells, we are able to take one form of energy and turn it into something else. If you've never read the book Think and Grow Rich, I suggest you read that book. For all brothers, read that book because he talks about how you can take your sexual energy and then turn it into a process to make money. What I've discovered is you could do it with sexual energy. You can also do it with anger. You could do it with frustration. You could do it with any so-called negative energy, so-called negative, right? Because no emotion is negative. It all is necessary, right? But there might be some emotions we don't like feeling. And so you could take that anger, for example. You are angry. You recognize that you're angry. You could take that anger, channel it a certain way so that it becomes raw energy and then convert it into motivation or discipline or something else, whatever it is. You could take that same anger and convert it into compassion, right? Which is something that I do regularly when it comes to my wife, right? I might be frustrated at something and I've learned how to take that frustration, turn it into raw energy, and then now respond with a level of compassion. Now the how, you got to get the course. I can't give that to you right now for free. A common misconception about men's emotional health: men don't feel emotions. There's a lot of women who sincerely are shocked when they find out that their man experiences emotions in a similar way that they do. Different, but similar. They're surprised, primarily because men have been conditioned or socialized to not share their emotions. And if I can be honest, I'll be the one to say it, rightfully so. Because when a man shares his emotions with a woman, 9 out of 10 times, his entire identity shifts in her eyes. She doesn't even see him the same. And as a man, that's probably the most terrifying thing, for someone that you love to see you as less than. So we perform, and we don't show that side of us. And we become cold, and we become stoic. And for some of us, it works. For some of us, it's not working because some of our friends, our wives, our children, they're so intuitive that they could tell something is off, but we don't feel safe enough to share it, right? But maybe we might feel more comfortable sharing it if we can debunk this misconception that we don't feel emotions. We feel just as powerfully, even if it's different. We feel just as powerfully as a woman does. What we do with our emotions, it depends on the situation. How can men feel encouraged? Was that the word? How can men feel encouraged to seek mental health or to approach their mental health without being stigmatized? Okay, let's start with the fact that there's a difference between someone who is mentally ill and someone who is going through a situation. Feeling emotions doesn't automatically make you mentally ill. Having strong emotions doesn't automatically make you mentally ill. We're supposed to be able to regulate our emotions regardless of how strong, regardless of the intensity of it. We should be able to regulate it. Our inability to regulate it suggests that there might be a problem. And so here's the thing. Most of us have not been taught how to regulate our emotions, especially as men. We were taught to suppress our emotions. And so I suggest that we all go through some form of therapy and or coaching to help us unpack those wounds that we've occurred in our childhood. Because suppressing emotions is not healthy. It doesn't help us, and it's not healthy. We have to learn how to navigate. Now, let me give you this, the difference between therapy and coaching. Therapy is a long-term process designed to dig deep into the subconscious and kind of get to the root of specific issues. And it takes time because we are designed to protect ourselves. The analogy of the mind being like an onion, that's real. And so we hit that first layer and we think that's what it is. And we genuinely believe that. It's not until you go through therapy that you start to find the multiple layers and unpeeling those layers. But therapy is a safe space because it's confidential and there's no judgment in that space. When it comes to coaching, the idea isn't necessarily to unpeel those layers. The idea is to help you work with where you are now to get to the desired result. And so if this is where you are, okay, let's work with that and figure out what needs to be done to get you to that next layer. Now, there might be some levels of peeling, but it's not meant to get deep, which is why I always suggest both. I believe that coaching, at least in my experience as I coach my clients, sometimes it's in the coaching atmosphere that they realize they really do need therapy, right? And sometimes when they're in the therapeutic space, they realize my therapist has nothing to coach me to that next level. They're just giving me the root cause and maybe some tools to deal with my emotions, but that doesn't help me get to my next goal. So that's where coaching comes into play. So I don't see it as an either or. I think for most people, they need both. But what you need first depends on where you are. And coaching, well, it depends. Coaching tends to be a little cheaper than therapy, but it depends. It depends on the coach. It depends on the therapist, right? But I think when we get to a space where we realize that most of us have not been taught, then the shame kind of goes away. Because your brother who's smiling in your face, dapping you up, saying all is well, he's battling things that he's not sharing with you. Just like how you dapped him up and said, hey, it's all good. There's things you're not sharing with him. And so I think when men start to come together and create these support groups, one of the groups that I'm working on is called the Brotherhood, an online group for us to come together and discuss certain things, but really a safe space for us to express what we're going through. When you realize this is a common issue that we face unique to men, things that women will never understand, nor do I think we should try to get them to understand it. I think when we come together and realize, wait, we go through similar issues, the brothers who overcame can give some advice. And the brothers who are going through it, they can get some support. I think when we come together and we create that support group for ourselves, we'll be more comfortable getting the help that we need on a professional level. So in my course, I talk about polarization, polarity. Polarization is the fundamental principle of attraction. No matter what field you study, there needs to be polarization for there to be attraction. So here's what happens to men when they get into relationships. They start to feel safe around her, and they start to believe the lie that they can be their authentic self around her. What happens is they do it too soon. We are hoping that you're with someone that you can eventually be your authentic self with. But if you show her those emotional aspects of you too soon, she starts to question your ability to maintain a masculine position throughout the relationship. That's what messes us up. The reality is, in the beginning, as men, we need to be able to really discern if this woman can handle our true, authentic self. And it takes time. So, for all the men who are dating, if you're dating, don't just date to see how she makes you feel, or if she's a vibe. Like, those things are important. If she could cook and clean, all that stuff is important. But observe her and see, is she a judgmental person? Is she an understanding person, right? You need to be able to gauge her ability to recognize the nuances of humanity. And is she wise enough to acknowledge the difference between something that's circumstantial and a core principle of a person? And I think sometimes, brothers, we get distracted by all the things that won't matter in the trenches. How cute she is, you know what I mean? How all that other, it don't matter in the trenches. When you're going through something, do you really have a queen who can remind you of your kingship? You know what I mean? Do you have a goddess who can remind you of your godhood? If you have a woman who just wants you for your benefits, then she can never handle your burdens. So at some point when you're in this dating stage, you got to really discern who you're dating. Now, if you're already married, if you're married and you're choosing to stay with your wife, then what you have to do is create a space for you where you can process those raw emotions and then be able to articulate them better with your queen, with your wife. Because when we're in the midst of our emotional episode, or whatever we want to call it, we don't have the words. We're finding them. We're looking for them. And we might say something that triggers our wives a certain way. I know the number one reason why men don't share what they're going through with their wife or with their partner, whoever it is. The number one reason why they don't is because they don't want to deal with how their emotions trigger their emotions. Every time a man expresses how he feels, now she feels a way about how he's feeling. And the conversation shifts from what's going on with him to now him trying to comfort her without him getting anything with what he's going through. And so, men, it's time to wise up. This is the time when you call your boys, your support group, your coach, or your therapist. This is when you call and just say, I need about 15 minutes, 20 minutes to just process. So when I get back to my queen, I have the words, right? Because honestly, if you're too emotional, especially if you're too emotional consistently, right? If you have all these emotions on a consistent basis, it is a turnoff to women. Now, will they admit that publicly? I don't know. But it is. We see the results of it. We see what they call us if we cry every day or if we're sad every day. They have words for us. And so we learn that and we put up that front. I'm not even mad at the front. I'm saying, who are you going to really get the help? You got to go somewhere. And so, yes, our emotions, our vulnerability, our burdens, it does impact our romantic relationships, but it doesn't have to. If you get a coach like myself or you get a therapist, you can find the tools to navigate through those things. Okay, when it comes to emotional vulnerability and building trust in a relationship, when you are emotionally vulnerable, it shows a level of honesty. It lets your partner know that you are an honest person. I would say before you're vulnerable, I would want you to be articulate. So what I mean by that is if you're feeling an emotion, if you're experiencing an emotion, before you're vulnerable enough to say what you're experiencing, you should probably be articulate and say, hey, I'm experiencing some things that I'm not quite ready to discuss with you. But when I feel safe and comfortable, we can have that conversation. That at least lets her know that you're not a liar, nor are you trying to hide anything. But there should be some level of privacy. Now, when it comes to trust, if I'm honest with you, trust is a choice. There isn't really enough that anyone can do to get somebody else to trust them. Everybody's meter on what's trustworthy is different for each person. At some point, you have to choose to trust the other person. So when we're more honest, when we're consistently honest, it helps. But if your partner has trust issues, it's not how often you're honest that helps her trust you. It's how infrequent you're dishonest that helps her trust you, right? Because any level of dishonesty is going to put her into a rapid state of distrust. And that's really not your fault because nobody is perfect. And so, yes, you need to have a certain level of privacy. I think there's a difference between being dishonest and being private. You don't have to share everything with your partner, but you should communicate that something is happening, which is honest, while maintaining your privacy. Say, hey, I'm working this out with my coach. I'm working this out with my therapist. And when I get to a certain stage, I can share it with you. And if you're with a partner who cannot respect that, then that's not the partner for you. What are the important emotional qualities that man can cultivate in a relationship? Well, I'm going to switch that word from quality to culture. Because I think that there's an emotional culture that men should cultivate in their relationships. Where I believe that for some relationships, a safe word is important. Where you choose a word that lets your partner know, hey, you about to get the raw. Like, I'm about to just go straight. And I don't necessarily want your input. I just need to get this off my chest. I think that's important. I think timing, knowing when to share certain things. Because here's the thing, right? If things are already rocky with your woman, logically we think, well, things are already rocky, so let me go ahead and just dump all this out, right? No, no, that doesn't work. Because emotions is like a weight. Emotional regulation is like a muscle. So it can get overwhelmed. It can get tired. So that's really not the best time to do it. Actually, the best time to share some of those rocky things is when you're good. Because her baseline is different. She's not starting at 100, and now you're adding more to it, to where she's saying things she doesn't even really feel, doesn't really believe, but she's already just overwhelmed, right? But if y'all just got over something, enjoy this time of peace for a few days. Enjoy the time of peace. Give it 2-3 days, and then you can bring up, hey, babe. And even asking a question like this, we're talking about the culture, emotional culture. Asking a question like, hey, babe, is it okay if I share something that I think we can both work on? Framing it like that sounds a lot better it sounds better than, hey, you've been doing this thing. Can we talk about that so you can get better? Because women hate to be the bad guy. Generally speaking, women do not like to be the source of pain or hurt because they know what it feels like to experience that. They hate the idea of being the ones causing that. And so if you're in a relationship, you want to be sensitive to that and frame your words, articulate. Like I said earlier, I prefer that you are articulate before you're vulnerable. Learning how to use your words, which is a masculine trait, I might add. Learning how to use your words so that you're expressing or communicating the right message in a way where it'll be received with the intent that you have. Because your intent is not to hurt her. Your intent is not to trigger her. Your intent is for her to hear what you're going through. How you use your words and when you use your words determines how she hears it. So that emotional culture is recognizing the timing, the method, the safety. Sometimes when she shares what she's going through, you have to just accept it. And don't rebuttal with but you do the same thing. Don't rebuttal. Even if you're right, the timing, now is not the time to express that. Because if it was that big of a deal for you, you should have expressed it sooner. Right? So take some accountability in that. So these are some ideas. When it comes to specific situations, you have to book me for a session and we can have those type of conversations to deal with your specific situation. There is a difference between masculine and feminine traits, but let me back up and kind of give just a little bit about what the energy is. So masculine energy is the energy of order. It's the hard energy. It's what some would call the push energy, right? It's the energy that is very rigid. And masculine energy is also the energy that's looking for resolve. We want to bring it to an end. That's masculinity. So the greatest end is death. So masculinity has a sense of chasing death, not to experience it, but to defeat it, to end death, right? Feminine energy is the energy of creativity, of nurture, the soft energy, the pull energy, the receiving energy. It's the experience. And feminine energy has no concerns about boundaries or borders. It's just, what are we doing? Let's turn it up 1,000, right? It's all about the experience. So when we start getting into masculine and feminine traits, What we really have to deal with is the intention behind it. Because someone can do an action, let's say paying the bills, right? That's one of the big ones. Paying the bills is a masculine thing. It's a providing thing. That's true to a degree. Some people pay the bills for that emotional response. It literally makes them feel good. Well, in that case, it's a feminine trait because it's dealing with feelings. It's not really dealing with order and structure, right? And so when you understand how the energy works, then you stop looking to present masculine, because that's what a lot of people do. So when I say present masculine, what I mean is they show up in what society says masculinity is, but they're highly emotional. This is why, when men, when they come together and they feel away, they're ready to fight because they think fighting is a masculine thing. Well, fighting is only masculine if it's necessary. Fighting is only masculine if it's in order. If you're fighting because your feelings are hurt, that's not masculine, that's feminine. And you feel masculine because society has convinced you that men fight. Well, no, we only fight if it's going to bring some type of resolve. And so this cycle of I kill you and then someone else kills me and then someone else kills them, this cycle that's all based off of emotions, that's not masculinity at all. It's femininity that's presenting as masculine. So in my course, I talk about the ego being one of those things. The ego is your feminine friend that wants to convince you that they're masculine. The ego is the feminine aspect of you that wants to protect you but can't because it's too emotional. This is why most decisions you make in your ego never works out well, because it's not logical. It's not thinking it through. It's not trying to figure out how to bring it to a resolve. It's momentary. It's experience-based. So in my course, I talk about how you master your ego, right? And so when it comes to masculine and feminine traits, we have to move away from the societal norms to a degree, because I want to be honest with you. We live in this society, so we got to play the game to a certain level. But I want you to play the game without losing your humanity. I want you to know who you are in the midst of the game, because then you become a better player. All right, so thank you once again for joining me. You can find me on Instagram, Lawrence Souffrant. You can go to my website, www.lawrencesouffrant.com. If you want to get the course, you can go to lsmasculinity.com. Also, find me on LinkedIn. If you're serious about booking me for a session or a speaking engagement, go to my LinkedIn as well as my website, because that's where I engage real business. But follow me on IG. I'm going to get more active on TikTok. We'll see. I got some ideas for the TikTok game, trying to keep up with y'all. But yeah, definitely IG and my website is where you go. And as far as my course is concerned, man, it is so powerful. I got so many testimonies that I want to share with you, but one in particular is a brother that I had who I was mentoring for years, and a lot of the principles I gave in the course. And he was a young brother when I met him. He was like 18 or even younger than that. And he's in his 20s now. He's married. He's making six figures. He is just doing so phenomenal. And he thanks me all the time. He said, I gave him things that his father didn't know to give him. And to even be able to have that level of understanding, realizing that his father had his own experience and he was only able to give his son what he had. He was able to understand that so that he can have a certain type of relationship with his father that's positive. He contributes all that to me. And that's just one of many brothers. So please go check out the course, especially if you're trying to work out certain dynamics within yourself or in relationships. Restoring Masculinity, www.lsmasculinity.com. Register today.